The wine was flowing at Marcello's, and I should have known that nothing good ever came from my wife's family dinners when the alcohol started early. But there I sat, Vincent Kavanagh, 39 years old, wearing my best discount suit that Nina had bought me for Christmas 2 years ago, watching my wife hold court like some kind of social media queen while her mother's credit card picked up the tab. "Oh, Vincent's doing well enough," Nina was saying to her friend Lana, that gossipy blonde who looked like she'd been assembled in a plastic surgery factory. "I mean, he manages the restaurant downtown. It's not exactly Wall Street, but we make it work." The way she said, "we make it work," made my jaw clench. I took a sip of the overpriced Chianti and kept my mouth shut, the way I'd learned to do over the past few years. Nina's parents, Judith and Henry Morrison, sat across from me looking like they'd stepped out of a country club catalog. Old money, old attitudes, and older grudges against guys like me who'd married above their station. "The important thing," Judith chimed in, her voice carrying that particular brand of passive aggression that wealthy mothers perfected, "is that Nina doesn't have to worry about money. Henry and I made sure of that when we helped them buy the house." I nearly choked on my wine. Helped them buy the house? The house I'd put the down payment on with money I'd saved from 10 years of working double shifts and weekend catering gigs. "Mom, please," Nina said, but she was smiling. That dangerous smile she got when she was about to twist the knife. "Vincent's very proud. He doesn't like talking about how we manage our finances." Lana leaned forward like a shark smelling blood in the water. "Oh, come on, Nina. We're all friends here. There's nothing wrong with being financially dependent on family. Lots of couples work that way." Financially dependent. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Around the table, I could see the smirk starting to form. Julia, Nina's other friend, was practically giggling into her wine glass. Mason, Nina's supposed business partner who'd been invited to this little gathering, was grinning like he'd just won the lottery. "I mean, it's actually quite modern," Mason added, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "The traditional male provider role is so outdated. There's nothing wrong with a man being supported by his wife's family." The table erupted in polite laughter. Not cruel laughter, which somehow made it worse. It was the kind of laughter that said they all agreed, they all knew, and they all felt sorry for poor Vincent who couldn't provide for his wife. I sat there, feeling the heat creep up my neck, watching Nina bask in the attention. She was beautiful. I'd give her that. 36 years old and still turning heads wherever she went, with her perfect blonde hair and her designer dress that probably cost more than most people made in a month. She'd built a decent following on Instagram selling lifestyle advice and promoting boutique fashion, but listening to her friends talk, you'd think she was running a Fortune 500 company. "The restaurant business is tough," Henry offered, trying to throw me a bone. "I'm sure Vincent works very hard." "Oh, he does," Nina said, reaching over to pat my hand like I was a well-behaved dog. "He's there 6 days a week. Sometimes I barely see him, but that's what it takes when you're not, naturally entrepreneurial." Naturally entrepreneurial. Like her boutique that sold overpriced scarves to other rich women was some kind of business empire. I excused myself to use the restroom, but instead I walked straight out to the parking lot. The December air hit my face like a slap, and I stood there for a moment breathing hard and trying to decide whether to get in my car and drive home or go back in there and set the record straight. Then I remembered the folder in my glove compartment. The folder I'd put together 6 months ago when I'd started getting suspicious about Nina's late nights and her sudden interest in business meetings with Mason. I'd been planning to use it for something else entirely, but tonight felt like the perfect time for a little truth-telling. I grabbed the folder and walked back into the restaurant, my heart pounding but my mind crystal clear. They were still laughing when I sat down, still riding high on their little joke about poor dependent Vincent. "Sorry about that," I said, placing the folder on the table. "I had to get something from the car." Nina glanced at the folder, and I saw a flicker of uncertainty cross her face. "What's that, honey?" I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. Bank transfer records, 10 years' worth, printed on official letterhead and highlighted in yellow where it mattered most. Well, since we're talking about our finances so openly tonight, I said, keeping my voice calm and conversational, I thought everyone might be interested in seeing how we really manage our money. I slid the first page across to Judith. This shows the $840,000 I've transferred to your retirement accounts over the past decade. Started right after Nina and I got married. The table went dead silent. Judith picked up the paper with a trembling hand, her eyes scanning the numbers. Henry leaned over to look, his face going pale. Vincent, Nina started, but I was already pulling out the next document. This is the deed to our house, I continued, sliding it toward Mason. You'll notice only my name is on it. Turns out the bank doesn't care about family money when you're the one making the mortgage payments for 8 years. Mason stared at the deed like it was written in a foreign language. Lana and Julia had stopped smirking. And this, I said, pulling out a thick stack of papers, shows every penny I've invested in Nina's boutique. The initial $50,000 to get it started, the $30,000 for inventory, the $20,000 for the website redesign, and the $15,000 just last month for the new location. I spread the papers across the table like I was dealing cards, bank statements, investment records, loan documents, all with my signature, all showing money flowing from my accounts to theirs. You see, the funny thing about being financially dependent is that someone actually has to be providing the finances, and for the past 10 years, that someone has been me. Nina's face had gone white. Vincent, you're embarrassing everyone. This isn't the place for... For what? For the truth? I pulled out another sheet. This shows the monthly payments I've been making to your parents' mortgage company. Apparently, that big house in Riverside Heights wasn't quite as paid off as everyone thought. Judith made a small sound, somewhere between a gasp and a sob. She was staring at the bank records, her perfectly manicured fingers shaking. I never said anything because I thought it was private, I continued. I thought it was between us, but since we're sharing with the whole table tonight, I figured everyone should know how things really work. Henry cleared his throat. Vincent, we never asked you to... No, you didn't ask. But you didn't say no when the checks started coming either. I looked around the table at their shocked faces. And you sure didn't correct anyone when they started talking about how your family money was supporting us. I pulled out the last document, a summary sheet I'd prepared months ago when I was trying to figure out just how much of my life I'd invested in Nina's family. Total amount, $1.2 million over 10 years. That's my salary, my bonuses, my savings, my inheritance from my father, and every penny I made from side jobs and investments. The silence stretched on. Other diners were starting to notice our table, the way conversations do when someone's world is falling apart in public. The restaurant job you all think is so quaint? I'm not just the manager, I'm a partner. I own 30% of Marcello's, and we're opening 2 more locations next year. I looked directly at Mason. I'm also a licensed real estate investor with properties in 3 states, but I guess that's not as interesting to talk about as my wife's Instagram account. Nina was crying now, quiet tears that she was trying to hide behind her napkin. But I wasn't done. So yes, Lana, you're absolutely right. There's nothing wrong with being financially dependent on family. The question is, which one of us has actually been doing the depending? I stood up and straightened my discount suit jacket. I'm going to head home now. Nina, you can explain to everyone how we really make it work. The documents are yours to keep. I started to walk away, then turned back. Oh, and Mason, next time you want to make jokes about traditional male provider roles, you might want to make sure you're not talking to someone who's been providing for your girlfriend's entire family. The last thing I saw before I walked out was Judith Morrison, the queen of old money society, putting her face in her hands and sobbing into her wine glass, while her daughter tried to explain how the man they'd all been mocking had been keeping their family afloat for a decade. The cold air felt good on my face as I walked to my car. My phone was already buzzing with texts, but I ignored them. Tomorrow, things were going to be very different in the Morrison family. Tonight, I was going home to figure out what came next. The next 3 days were like living in an iceberg. Nina barely spoke to me, and when she did, it was to accuse me of humiliating her family and making a scene. She'd moved into the guest bedroom and was spending most of her time on the phone with her friends, probably trying to do damage control on her social media image. I went to work like nothing had happened, but I could tell the story was getting around. Marcello himself pulled me aside on Wednesday morning and asked if everything was okay at home. Family dinner got a little heated, I told him, which was the understatement of the year. "These things happen," he said, patting my shoulder. "But Vincent, you know you're like a son to me. If you need anything, you ask." That meant more to me than he probably realized. Marcello had given me a chance when I was just a kid with a high school diploma and a lot of ambition. He'd taught me the business, helped me invest my money wisely, and made me a partner when I'd proven I could handle the responsibility. He was more of a father figure than Nina's family had ever acknowledged. Thursday evening, I was at Ricky's gym, working off my frustration on the heavy bag. Ricky Torino had been my best friend since we were teenagers, back when we both thought we might make something of ourselves in the boxing ring. We'd figured out pretty quickly that we weren't championship material, but we'd kept training, kept the friendship, and kept the gym as our place to work through life's problems. "So I heard you dropped a nuclear bomb at dinner the other night," Ricky said, holding the bag steady while I threw combinations. News travels fast. "Nina's been calling everyone trying to explain what happened. According to Julia Martinez, who told my cousin Rosa, you ambushed them with private financial documents and made Nina's mother cry." I stopped punching and looked at him. "That's the story she's telling?" "That's one version. The other version, which came from Mason's ex-wife, is that you proved Nina's family has been living off your money for years, and they're all broke without you." Mason's ex-wife. That was interesting. "How does she know about it?" "Mason called her, asking if he could borrow money. Apparently some business deal he was counting on just fell through." Ricky grinned. "Funny how these things work out." I started hitting the bag again, harder this time. "It's not about the money, Rick. It's about the lies. For 2 years, they've been treating me like some kind of charity case, like I should be grateful that Nina's family tolerates me. And now they know the truth. Now they know I've been supporting all of them, and they're pissed off about being embarrassed instead of being grateful." Ricky let go of the bag and stepped back. "So what's your next move?" That was the question I'd been asking myself for 3 days. The marriage was probably over, I'd accepted that. But Nina wasn't just going to let this go quietly. She was already working on controlling the narrative, making herself the victim of my cruel revelation. "I think I need to protect myself," I said finally. "If she's going to make this ugly, I need to be ready." "What kind of protection are you talking about?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from Nina. "We need to talk. Come home." I showed Ricky the message. He shook his head. "That sounds like an ambush waiting to happen." Only one way to find out. I drove home through the December slush, my mind racing through possibilities. Nina's car was in the driveway, but so was Mason's black Escalade. That was interesting. What was her business partner doing at our house on a Thursday night? I parked and sat in my car for a moment, thinking. Then I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recorder app. If this was going to be an ambush, I wanted evidence. The front door was unlocked, and I could hear voices coming from the living room. Nina's voice, upset and angry. Mason's voice, lower and more controlled. And a third voice I didn't recognize. I hung my coat in the closet and walked toward the living room, my phone recording in my pocket. "Can't just let him get away with this," Nina was saying. "He made my mother cry in public. He humiliated my entire family." "The question is, What we can prove, the unfamiliar voice said. It was a woman, professional sounding. If he's been controlling the finances, there might be grounds for financial abuse. Financial abuse. I stopped in the hallway, just out of sight. That's exactly what it is, Mason's voice. He's been using money to control her, to make her family dependent on him. Then he uses that dependency to humiliate them in public. The challenge, the woman continued, is that the documentation he showed proves he was the one providing the money. We'd need to demonstrate that this was part of a pattern of control and manipulation. I eased closer to the doorway. Nina was sitting on the couch with a woman in a business suit. A lawyer, obviously. Mason was standing by the window, looking like he owned the place. What about the restaurant? Nina asked. He claims he's a partner, but I've never seen any paperwork. If we can prove he's been lying about his assets, that would help establish a pattern of deception, the lawyer said. Has he ever prevented you from accessing bank accounts or credit cards? Well, no, but has he ever threatened to cut off financial support to control your behavior? Nina hesitated. Not exactly, but the way he handled the dinner was legal, the lawyer interrupted. Embarrassing, but legal. He has every right to disclose his own financial contributions. Mason stepped forward. What if we approach this differently? What if Nina files for divorce and claims half of everything, including the house and his share of the restaurant? That's possible, but if he can prove he funded her business and her family's expenses, a judge might view that as dissipation of marital assets for her benefit. I'd heard enough. I stepped into the room, and all three of them turned to stare at me like I'd caught them planning a bank robbery. Don't stop on my account, I said. This is fascinating. Please continue discussing how you're going to destroy my life. Nina's face went red. Vincent, this isn't what it looks like. Really? Because it looks like you're meeting with a lawyer to figure out how to paint me as financially abusive for having the audacity to pay your bills for 10 years. The lawyer stood up, clearly uncomfortable. Mr. Kavanagh, I think there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. You're here to help my wife figure out how to spin the truth into a lie that makes her look like a victim. I looked at Mason. And you're here because you want to make sure she gets enough money in the divorce to keep funding whatever business partnership you two have been working on? Mason's jaw tightened. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? I pulled out my phone and stopped the recording. Well, I guess we'll find out. I've got the whole conversation recorded, including the part where you suggested Nina claim half of assets she never contributed to. The lawyer grabbed her briefcase. I think I should go. Nina, call my office if you want to discuss this further, but I'd recommend marriage counseling before considering legal action. She left quickly, probably realizing she'd walked into a mess that could get her in trouble with the bar association. Nina and Mason were left staring at me like I was a bomb that might go off. You recorded us? Nina's voice was shrill. That's illegal. Actually, it's not. This is my house, and I'm allowed to record conversations in my own home. I looked at Mason. The question is, what's your excuse for being here? Last I checked, business partners don't usually help each other plan divorces. Mason stepped toward me, and I could see the anger in his eyes. You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you can just humiliate people and walk away? I think I can tell the truth about my own money, yeah. Your money? He laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. You're a restaurant manager, Vincent. You're nobody. The only reason you have anything is because Nina's family gave you a chance. That did it. 10 years of biting my tongue, 10 years of being polite to people who looked down on me, 10 years of being grateful for the privilege of supporting them. I was done. Get out of my house. What? You heard me. Get out of my house. The house I bought, with my money, that has my name on the deed. I stepped closer to him. And if I see you here again, we're going to have a very different kind of conversation. Mason looked like he wanted to take a swing at me, but he was smart enough to know that wouldn't end well for him. I had 6 inches and 40 pounds on him, plus 20 years of boxing training. "This isn't over," he said, grabbing his coat. "Yes, it is. Whatever business partnership you and Nina have been working on, it's done. Find another investor." After he left, Nina and I stood in the living room staring at each other. The silence stretched on until she finally spoke. "I want a divorce." "I figured. I'll have my lawyer contact yours." "I want half of everything." "You can want whatever you like. What you'll get depends on what you can prove you're entitled to." She started crying again, but this time it felt like performance art. "How did we get here, Vincent? We used to love each other." "We did. But love isn't enough when one person is lying to the other about who they really are." "I never lied to you. You've been lying to everyone about me for years, letting people think I was some kind of deadbeat who married into money, letting your friends mock me while I paid their bills. I never meant for it to go this far. But you never stopped it either, and tonight, you were planning to make it worse." I walked toward the stairs, then turned back. "I'll sleep in the guest room tonight. Tomorrow, I'll find somewhere else to stay until we figure this out." "Vincent, wait." I stopped, hoping she might say something that would change everything. An apology, an explanation, anything that might save what was left of us. "The recording you made tonight. You can't use that in court. It would destroy me." I looked at her for a long moment. This woman I'd loved enough to give up everything for, who was still more worried about her reputation than about what she'd done to our marriage. "Nina, you've already destroyed yourself. I just finally stopped helping you hide it." 2 weeks later, I was living in a furnished apartment downtown, close enough to walk to work but far enough from the house to think clearly. Nina had hired a different lawyer, one with a reputation for aggressive divorce tactics, and the papers I'd received made it clear she was going for blood. She wanted half the house, half my share of the restaurant, half my investment portfolio and spousal support. She was also claiming that I'd hidden assets and engaged in financial manipulation during our marriage. Her lawyer was painting a picture of me as a controlling husband who'd used money as a weapon against his wife and her family. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. My lawyer, Patricia Chen, was a sharp woman in her 50s who specialized in complex financial divorces. She'd looked at Nina's claims and laughed out loud. "She's claiming you manipulated her by paying her family's bills?" Patricia shook her head. "Vincent, I've seen a lot of desperate strategies, but this might be the most ridiculous. Can she make it stick? Not a chance. We have 10 years of bank records showing voluntary transfers. We have documentation of your investments and business partnerships that predate your marriage. And we have that recording of her planning to fabricate claims against you." The recording had turned out to be more valuable than I'd expected. Nina's conversation with the first lawyer had revealed that she knew her claims were false, which would make it very difficult for her to argue them in court with a straight face. But Nina wasn't just fighting in court. She was fighting in the court of public opinion, and that's where things were getting ugly. She'd posted a long, carefully crafted message on her Instagram account about surviving financial abuse and finding the courage to leave a controlling relationship. She didn't mention my name, but she didn't have to. Everyone who'd been at that dinner knew exactly who she was talking about. The post had gotten hundreds of supportive comments from people who had no idea what the real story was. Her follower count was actually going up as she positioned herself as a brave survivor of an abusive marriage. It was brilliant, in a sociopathic kind of way. The problem was that some of those supporters were people I knew. Julia had shared Nina's post with her own commentary about red flags she'd supposedly seen in our marriage. Lana had posted about the importance of supporting women who find the courage to speak their truth. Even some of the staff at the restaurant were giving me strange looks, like they were wondering if their partner was really the kind of man who'd abuse his wife. I was sitting in Ricky's office at the gym, telling him about the latest developments, when he dropped a bombshell of his own. Mason's been coming around here, he said. I looked up from the legal papers I'd been reviewing. What do you mean, coming around? He joined the gym last week, says he wants to get in shape, maybe try some boxing. Ricky's expression was grim. But he's been asking a lot of questions about you, about your training, about whether you ever lost your temper, about whether I've seen you get violent. He's fishing for evidence. That's what I figured. I told him you were one of the most controlled fighters I'd ever trained, that I'd never seen you lose your cool in 20 years. Ricky leaned forward. But Vincent, the guy's up to something. He's not here to work out. He's here to build a case. As if on cue, the door to the office opened and Mason walked in, wearing brand new boxing gear that probably cost more than most people's cars. Hope I'm not interrupting, he said, but his smile said he hoped he was. Actually, you are, Ricky said. This is a private conversation. No problem. I just wanted to let Vincent know that Nina's doing much better since she got away from him. She's staying with friends, getting the support she needs. I stood up slowly. Mason, I'm going to give you one warning. Stay away from me, stay away from my business, and stop playing games. Games? He laughed. Vincent, this isn't a game. This is real life. Nina's finally free to tell people what you're really like. What I'm really like is someone who supported your girlfriend and her entire family for a decade while she lied about it. What you're really like is someone who's trying to manipulate a divorce so you can keep access to money that was never yours. Mason stepped closer, and I could see he was trying to provoke me. You know what I think? I think you're angry because you finally got caught. All those years of controlling Nina, making her family dependent on you, and now everyone knows what kind of man you really are. It was a masterful performance. If someone had been recording, it would have sounded like he was confronting an abuser. But I'd been dealing with bullies my whole life, and I knew exactly what he was doing. Ricky, I said, not taking my eyes off Mason, are the security cameras in here working? Always. Good. Mason, I want you to listen very carefully. I never controlled Nina. I never manipulated her family. I voluntarily supported them because I thought it was the right thing to do. The only person who's been lying and manipulating is you. That's not what Nina says. Nina says a lot of things that aren't true, like the fact that you two are just business partners. His face changed, just for a second, but it was enough. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't. Just like you don't know why your ex-wife says you called her begging for money after our dinner party. Just like you don't know why you're really here, trying to get me to lose my temper on camera. I picked up my jacket and headed for the door. But here's what I know, Mason. I know you've been sleeping with my wife. I know you've been helping her plan this divorce. And I know you're both counting on getting enough money out of me to fund whatever life you think you're going to have together. I stopped at the door and turned back. The problem is, I'm not the same guy who used to sit quietly while people mocked me at dinner parties. That guy is gone, and the guy who's left doesn't lose his temper. He wins. I left Mason standing in Ricky's office, probably wondering if his plan had just backfired. But I wasn't done yet. If Nina wanted to fight dirty, I was going to show her what dirty really looked like. The next morning, I called Patricia and told her I wanted to go on the offensive. What did you have in mind? She asked. I want to subpoena Mason's financial records. I want to know exactly what kind of business partnership he and Nina really have, and I want to depose everyone who was at that dinner party. Vincent, that's going to be expensive, and it might backfire. Do you really want to drag this out in public? Patricia, they're already dragging it out in public. Nina's got half of Instagram convinced I'm an abuser, and Mason's trying to bait me into doing something stupid so he can prove it. I'm done playing defense. There was a long pause. Okay, but if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. I want a private investigator to look into Mason's business dealings. I want a forensic accountant to trace every penny Nina's spent in the last 2 years, and I want to know exactly what kind of relationship they really have. How long will that take? A month, maybe 2. But Vincent, once we start down this road, there's no going back. This is going to get very ugly, very fast. I thought about Nina's Instagram post, about Mason's performance at the gym, about 10 years of being treated like a second-class citizen by people I'd been supporting. It's already ugly, Patricia. Now it's time to make it honest. 3 weeks later, I got the call I'd been waiting for. Patricia's private investigator had found something interesting. Mason's company is broke, she told me. He's been using investor money to fund his personal lifestyle, and he's facing potential fraud charges. But here's the interesting part. Nina's boutique has been making payments to his company for the past 18 months, payments that don't correspond to any legitimate business expenses. What kind of payments? Consulting fees, marketing services, business development, all vague enough that they could be anything, but large enough that they represent most of her boutique's profits. I felt a cold smile spreading across my face. So she's been funneling money from her business to his company. Money that originally came from you, since you've been funding her business from the beginning. Vincent, I think your wife has been helping Mason commit fraud with your money. Can we prove it? We can prove the payments. Whether we can prove intent is another question. But it's definitely enough to destroy her credibility in the divorce proceedings. I hung up the phone and sat in my apartment, looking out at the city lights. Nina had wanted to play games with the truth, to rewrite our history and paint herself as a victim. But the truth had a way of coming out, especially when you had the resources to dig for it.